Good day, everyone. I'm Natasha Lombard. You can see me in the picture in the right-hand corner there. I'm a plant taxonomist from SANBI, the South African National Biodiversity Institute. My focus group at the moment is the genus Thesium. This genus is common throughout South Africa, and many people struggle with identifications. So I'll be giving a short video course on the identification of Thesium species with the focus on the summer rainfall area in South Africa. To make it a bit easier to follow and to refer back to, I have divided the course into 4 short videos. The first being an introduction to Thesium, and then 2 videos on the morphology of the genus, and lastly a practical example of an identification with a live plant. So Thesium forms part of the family Santalaceae, and species of the genus are root hemiparasites, meaning that they parasitize on the roots of other plants, but they can also still photosynthesize. I've included a photo here of the connection between the Thesium and the host. So here you can see this dark brown root is the host root, and this light brown root is the Thesium root. And the Thesium root then grows this extension that wraps around the host root, which we call a hostorium, and this is where the exchange of nutrients happens. And then the species of the genus also grow as herbs or as shrubs, and they have these narrow and linear leaves, and the leaves are sometimes reduced to scales and also dry nut-like fruit. Thesium occurs worldwide, and the majority of species are found in the Old World, so Eurasia and Africa. But the center of diversity is then found in Africa, and more specifically Southern Africa. In South Africa, we have about 170 of the more or less 350 species in the genus, and about 65 species are found in the summer rainfall region. I thought it would be good to just show a few examples of what species in the summer rainfall region look like, to be able to spot them in the field. So many of the species are herbaceous and quite leafy, such as Thesium ovatifolium and Thesium pallidum. Other species are very small, such as Thesium costatum, while others can grow woody and quite tall, up to about 1.5 or 2 meters tall, such as Thesium procerum, also Thesium gypsophiloides. Others are very tall and very slender, such as Thesium angulosum, Thesium natalensum. Others can grow completely prostrate, so close to the ground, like Thesium varmerii, or erect, like Thesium multiramulosum. So it's just to give an idea of the diversity that we find in the summer rainfall region. And then the different flowers and inflorescence types that we find in the summer rainfall region. I will go into more detail on the morphology in parts 2 and 3, but as you can see, some of the flowers are quite hairy on the inside, while others are completely smooth with glabrous or hairless lobes. And mostly the flowers are very, very small, only about 2 or 3 millimeters long. Just some very brief background on the taxonomy of the genus. The taxonomy is actually quite out of date. The last revision of the South African species was done in 1925, and that was by Dr. Hill. So that's almost 100 years ago. My colleagues and I are currently in the process of revising the genus, at least the Southern African species to start with, but this is still a work in progress. So Dr. Hill's revision is the most up-to-date that we have to work with. I should mention that there was a new classification for the genus was published in 2020 based on molecular data, but this publication did not include any taxonomic treatments or identification keys. So for the purpose of this course, we'll just be focusing on Dr. Hill's revision. So he divided the almost 128 species that were known at the time into 4 sections based on the flower morphology. So species of section Imberbia have these smooth or glabrous flower lobes. Sometimes they can be slightly papillate. And then sections Barbata, Penisolata, and Annulata have these bearded flower lobes, and we say that they are bearded because these long hairs resemble a beard. This table gives a summary of the flower characteristics of each of the 4 sections. This is useful as some of the identification resources refer to these characters and sections. I'm not going to go through all of this in detail, as I'll go through it in the 3rd part, but it's handy just to keep this as a summary. I would just like to point out here that when we refer to the post-staminal tuft of hairs, we refer to these very small hairs behind the anther, and when we refer to the ring of hairs inside the flower tube, we refer to these small hairs that alternate with the stamens. The ring of hairs inside the flower tube are only present in species in the Cape, so it's only the first 3 characters that are applicable to the summer rainfall species. Anyone who's ever tried to identify a Thesium probably knows that it can be quite challenging. And I just wanted to briefly touch on where these identification challenges stem from. The first thing that complicates the situation is that many of the important morphological characters of Thesium tend to be very small. For example, the flowers that are only about 3 millimeters long. And many of the important characteristics are found on the inside of the flowers, such as we saw in the previous slide. And these can only be seen when these tiny flowers are dissected. And then there's also the problem that the species are very variable, and often there's a wide range of character states even within one species. And then some of the characteristics are also quite cryptic, meaning that they are difficult to interpret, and all of this makes using identification keys quite difficult. It's not only then that identification keys are difficult to use, but they are also outdated. And we're still doing research on this, and we can continue working on updating identification keys, and that's part of the research that I'm currently working on. And we also have incomplete field guides then that many people relate on, so just to give some background. Despite all of these challenges, there are resources available to the general public to assist with identifications. And using a combination of the resources that I've listed in the next few slides, it is usually possible to make a correct identification. So Hill's identification key, like I said, it's the most complete that we have to work with, and it can be found at this link. And then Dr. Marianne Leroux from Sanby and I have also made a pilot electronic identification key, which has 25 of the summer rainfall species with many photographs and distribution information. So this might also be quite handy. It can be found at this link. And then looking at photos of the species, the Phyto Images website has many photos of Thesium species and also other plants. It's a good resource in general, not just for Thesium. And it's often possible to make or confirm an identification by just scrolling through these photos on the Phyto Images website, and it's usually of photos of live plants. And then distribution maps are always very useful. These can be found at Sanby's new POSA website under the Explore option. And these distribution maps are continually updated as we curate the collections of specimens in the Sanby Herbarium. Species descriptions can be found at these 3 websites, and it might not be applicable to everyone, but for those who are interested, up-to-date information on species names can be found on Kew's Plants of the World websites. And then I'm always happy to assist with identifications. You're welcome to send me dried specimens at the National Herbarium in Pretoria, or photos via email. And usually it's better to see the plants in person, so dried specimen, but I know that's not always possible, so photographs can also work well. People often ask me which parts of the plant are important to photograph, so I've made this list and used Thesium procerum as an example. Not all of the photos will be needed for each species, but this is a good point to work from. Unfortunately, some species cannot be identified without dissecting their flowers, but we can usually get close to a correct identification even without them. So feel free to contact me at any time. My email address is also at the beginning of the video. And then I will be continuing with part 2.